Federal aid is on its way to parts of Kansas suffering from record amounts of flooding, but it may not help you. Plus, the governor says she's working on a way to prevent more natural disasters like we've been seeing across the state. This after touring the Twister Strike Zone in Douglas County. And a musical protest demanding Medicaid expansion from the Kansas Senate sparks controversy on the legislature's last day. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. 9 supporters of Medicaid expansion took their concerns to the Senate this week, saying they wouldn't shut up until the Senate expanded Medicaid or they were arrested. What happened next sparked a controversy that's still playing out. The Topeka Capital Journal's Sherman Smith shot this video Wednesday morning as Reverend Sarah Oglesby Dunnigan of Topeka sang and chanted, demanding Medicaid expansion. When asked to sit down and be quiet, she promised to continue singing until Capitol Police arrested her or senators passed Medicaid expansion. The protest continued for about 20 minutes until Capitol Police ejected media from the Senate floor and locked the gallery. That's when police removed 9 people from the Senate chamber, giving 1 a citation. Sarah Oglesby Dunnigan confirms she was that one. They did allow media back into the chamber later. In a written statement, Senate President Susan Wagle said of the incident, "Legally protected peaceful protest is consistent with some of the best traditions of American dissent. Today's demonstrations were pure obstructionism that stifled debate, placing a roadblock in front of democracy." Several news organizations protested the removal of journalists from the scene, calling that unconstitutional. The Sunshine Coalition, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and the Press Association have filed a joint formal Open Meetings Act complaint with the Attorney General's office. And joining me on the desk this week to discuss this and more, we have State Representative Tim Hodge, Democrat from Newton, and former state senator, current Sedgwick County Commissioner Michael O'Donnell, Republican from Wichita. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So you guys have both spent your time at the legislature. I've spent my time there. I'm going to start with how unusual this protest was. We've all seen protests, but it seems like the Medicaid expansion protests have been going a little bit farther every time, and this one entered the range of few people have seen anything like it before.
Well, this session we've had banners dropped in the middle of the day. I think it was even during a celebration of the police officers. We had flyers dropped in the middle of the day. We've had disruptions in the Senate chamber. I think it's just a symptom and something that says, look, we have to do something. We've got so many people out there that just want health insurance. And it's not people that are not working. We're talking about people that are making above minimum wage, but if they're the health insurance premium is just going to cut way too much into their monthly budget. These are folks who are working that need health insurance that we could easily expand. But for whatever reason, we have to bottle it up, and we're so scared of costs. We're not scared of tax cuts for corporations and the rich people, but we can't give people health insurance. It makes no sense to not expand Medicaid, and we've tried. In 2017, we passed it. It got vetoed. In 2018, we tried 5 times with amendments. None of them went on because it's an election year. Last year, the House passed it. The Senate bottled it up. And next year, I'm being cynical when I say they're going to put a whole bunch of work requirements onto it to make it so that it's difficult to even be on Medicaid. So in any event, it's a topic where we have to get it passed. We've tried to get it passed, and I think it's just going to come down to a different set of legislators to get it passed.
Interesting perspective.
Well, it's been a hot issue for years. When I was up in the legislature and I actually chaired the health committee, it was a highly controversial issue. In fact, Laura Kelly was my ranking minority member on the committee, and I know she and I got into quite a few arguments about it. But at the end of the day, I think the supporters of it, and only a small portion, right, very small number of people, but they are getting just more hostile. I've talked to Susan Wagle since. In fact, I talked to her again today about it. And there's a lot more to what had happened on the floor. The Highway Patrol were called in, who handled the security at the State House. They were saying, get everybody off the floor. Even senators were being ushered off the floor.
Well,
so there was a lot more to it.
I had senators tell me that they were there when the protesters were removed from the gallery. So senators were not completely off the floor.
Right, but they were told to clear the chamber by the Highway Patrol. This is what President Wagle has told me. I have no reason to doubt her rendition of the story. Of course, I wasn't there, so
yes.
I can't speak to it. But I do know there was more to the story.
Well, isn't that always the case?
Yeah.
Is it a surprise? I mean, as you said, this has been a hot button issue for years. There have been multiple attempts through the legislature in various different ways. Is it a surprise that supporters who are, for lack of a better term, the working poor, that for them to have reached a point where the frustrations are boiling over?
No, and I think what President Wagle put in her statement was that as long as it's not obstructionist, having this debate is a good thing and it's healthy. It was a different tone this year, more death threats even on some of the legislators, and of course the banners that Representative Hodge talked about that were covered in blood. I think people have just reached their limit and their frustration with it, and I do agree in a representative republic like we have, we need to have a debate and people should vote on it. So the Senate does need to have a vote.
I think there's a difference, but I mean, we've had this concept in front of us for a long time, since at least 2014. And we've studied it, we've studied the costs, we've studied who needs it, we've studied who would participate in it, and it comes down to 130, 150,000 people could have health insurance. We've had the number from the Hospital Association. It's over $3 billion that could be circulating and percolating around Kansas right now amongst our healthcare workers and the folks who need the health insurance. That would be an instant boost to our economy. We're already paying our federal income taxes so that California and New York can use our money to insure their working class folks. But we can't do it. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's unbelievable that the leadership in both houses makes this so hard when all the other states are benefiting from this. No state has rewinded Medicaid, and they always say, "Oh, it's going to bankrupt us." Kansas is less than 1% of the country's population. It is not going to bankrupt the country. We deserve it. We pay for it, and yet we don't expand it, and it makes no sense whatsoever. I could be more cynical if you want, but I better not be.
Well, and I know, Michael, that you have a response to that, but we do have some other things to talk about,
Sure.
so we're going to move on. Senators and state representatives were there this week to do some wrap up at the end of this session. And senators eventually did get back to work and ended up handing the governor her first veto override on a vote that crossed the political aisle. The governor had removed several items from the Republican-approved budget, arguing her vetoes would shore up the state's finances. But lawmakers on both sides of the aisle felt it was more important to put that money into mental health care programs. The state's pension plan and K-Tracks, a program which works to ID shady prescription drug purchases, among other things. They failed to override the governor's veto on another tax bill that would have allowed voters to itemize their tax deductions and allowed corporations to bring overseas profits into Kansas untaxed. And of course, that second bill is one that was a second attempt at making that change in the tax code here in Kansas. Second veto, second failure to override. Not a big surprise there, I don't think.
Not a big surprise. The difference between the first tax vote and this new tax vote was the other tax vote was heavy on the corporate giveaways. Mm-hmm. Both of them, gave the itemizers back their deductions. It started us down the road to reducing food sales tax, of which a conversation that I am really pushing up there at the State House. But the but the corporate giveaway was much less in the second vote. Now, initially, I voted against it because it was given to us initially at 1 in the morning on the last day of the session. I don't like to vote for 100-page bills at 1 in the morning, so I didn't vote for it. After you get a month to look at it and you say, oh, it doesn't give that much to the corporations, and it does fix the itemizer issue. It does start the road down to lowering food sales tax. I think I'm okay with that. Now, a lot of my colleagues would differ with me on that. Colleagues, I mean Democrats. But at the end of the day, when I looked at it, I said, you know what, I don't live in a perfect world. I'm in the Kansas legislature where compromise is part of the job. And so I was able to go with that bill. Now, it's going to be an interesting session next year because we still need to fix the itemizer issue. We still need to fix the food sales tax issue. And we're going to be having money come in every year. And Kansas are going to have to look at us and say, you know, you're getting your ending balances and your silos filled up, but are you doing it with our itemizer money and our food sales tax? And the answer is going to be, yeah, we are. And we need to fix that because that's just not right. And at the end of the day, people are not going to say, wow, look at those great ending balances when I'm paying the highest food sales tax in the country. That's just, and my itemizations are gone. They're not going to be appreciative of that.
Yeah. Well, and I know you had been fighting for the food sales tax reduction as well up at the statehouse.
It's been discussed for many years. Kansans truly do pay the highest sales tax when you combine local sales tax in the nation on food. So it is something that needs to be addressed, and I think both parties have been derelict in their duties to try to work on that. But for me, with the tax plan, you looked at this second version that was just failed to have the numbers to override it, but it was a lot smaller figure for the governor and for the budget. I think most states that have had the same type of tax code that Kansas does, where we do itemize, decoupling from the federal law after the Trump tax cuts from 2017, most of the states were able to address that in their 2018 session. So here we are in 2019, still unable to help Kansans out, because we should be able to deduct differing issues, whether it's your mortgage, charitable giving, you name it. There does need to be a fix for it, and Kansans deserve that. And I truly thought the second plan was a good compromise between what the chamber had wanted initially and where Governor Kelly thought that she could end up. But it comes down to, how do you balance the state's budget? You know, they added hundreds of millions of dollars into K through 12 again. They were able to restore funding to higher education, give state employees pay increases, and Medicaid costs do continue to go up year after year after year. You still have the prisons that are in turmoil. I mean, there's a lot of areas that the state needs money to fix a lot of these problems. So I believe that's why the governor was even against this more mild version, which I can guarantee you the state chamber and other interest groups were not happy with that second plan, but they thought it was better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I know the governor, when she made the first veto, had said if it's just the tax decoupling and the sales tax, grocery sales tax, that I can sign.
For individuals.
If leadership would have been brave enough to separate the three issues in that bill, the corporation giveaway, the food sales tax, and the individual, the itemizer fix. If we would have been able to vote on those separately, it would have been a different story. But to hold the sales tax and the itemizer fix hostage with the corporate giveaway was just legislative malpractice on the leadership's part. And that needed to be changed. I said it a million times up there. But they had to have their corporate giveaway, and so it just comes down to corporations over people. That's how I see the leadership seeing this state. They would rather have their corporate overlords get their tax decrease rather than give people a food sales tax and their itemizers fixed.
Okay, real quick, I want to touch on the override that did occur with the budget. And that really, a lot of Democrats crossed the aisle on that to vote for the override on that budget. What does this say for the governor? I mean, How big of a hurt is it for a governor to lose a veto override vote?
I don't think it's that big of a problem for her. The issues that she vetoed was mental health, K-Tracks, a school reading program, and CAPERS. I mean, they were all good things to pay for. CAPERS, I think the Republican legislature, they failed to make the payments for a few years. And so it's fun to see them all of a sudden find religion based on CAPERS. Oh, we haven't funded it for years, but oh, now it's this sacred cow that we have to fund. And so again, sorry for the cynicism, it's just they now make it a big issue. And so yeah, let's fund CAPERS. Let's make up for those previous payments.
Okay.
K-Tracks,
Michael?
etc.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
And I would agree, CAPERS, the mental health issue, K-Tracks, all extremely important things. There has been a little bit of mismanagement with CAPERS, but I believe Kathleen Sebelius for many years didn't fund it. Sam Brownback did try to backfill it, and in fact, we were one of the worst 5, I believe, and now we're about middle of the pack. And coming up in the next 20 years, we're going to be solvent as long as we keep making these payments.
Okay.
At Sedgwick County, it was very personal because there were only 3 mental health crisis centers across the state of Kansas, in Shawnee County, in Saline County, and in Sedgwick County. And she cut the funding for that, about $1.9 million. Well, that was going to be devastating to us in ComCare and what we do here. And we reached out to all of our legislative friends, even Democratic friends, and I already thanked Representative Hodge for it, and I thanked Representative Brandon Whipple on,
You're very welcome.
on Facebook, because that is a bipartisan issue. And mental health, just this last Sunday in the Wichita Eagle, you had the superintendent of 259, you had the chief of police Ramsey, Sedgwick County District Attorney Mark Bennett, and Sedgwick County Sheriff Jeff Easter talking about the importance of funding mental health treatment, but also giving opportunities for people that have mental health, helping them. And that would have been devastating.
We've certainly talked about that a lot on this show. I mean, we devoted an entire episode
But Governor
to it.
Kelly made that a huge issue, and that's why I think everyone was baffled, and I believe she even knew it was a mistake after she vetoed it because of the backlash that she had, because that was just $1.9 million. So why are we going after that? And we were able to get, only because bipartisan issues came together.
It's a question we don't have an answer on right now, and I
Right.
don't know if we will or not.
No, probably not.
So we've got some other things. The governor was out talking about tornadoes, flooding, etc. An EF4 tornado tore through at least 3 counties this week here in Kansas, leaving behind miles of devastation. The governor toured the damage area and promised she's working to find ways to prevent future natural disasters like those plaguing the state this year. I spoke with her in this story filed with Cake News earlier this week.
Incredibly overwhelmed. I mean, you're right. You really can't tell from what you see on TV. But even more than being up there, and this spreads over 32 miles. It just keeps going on and on and on.
The governor had much the same reaction as some who were helping clean up the tornado damage in Linwood.
It was just a hard thing to see. You see it on your guys' news all the time and you go, oh, that's terrible. And then you get here in person.
The presence of volunteers like this, part of what Governor Laura Kelly found so remarkable as she toured portions of the 32-mile-long, 1-mile-wide storm track Thursday afternoon. The other part, the resilience of those caught in the storm.
I don't know, I was sitting in the basement and I seen the raptors up there shaking and all that, and I'm saying, well, good Lord, I guess if you're going to take me, I appreciate what you give me. And
many already concentrating on how to rebuild, not on what they lost. Meanwhile, the governor says she's working on a long-term plan to help prevent the current pile of disasters in Kansas, from flooding to tornado damage.
As we're in the midst of all of this, and yesterday I met with the governors of Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska, and we are going to be getting together and doing a long-term plan for how we can deal with these kinds of things in the future.
And certainly the state trying to provide some aid as well, but that long-term plan, I mean, we can't prevent natural disasters from happening. So what is it, from your knowledge of government, very quickly, that could possibly be done? What can we be talking about there? Michael, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I think that here in Sedgwick County, we've averted crisis after crisis with the Big Ditch and now the Mitch Mitchell Valley Center Wichita floodway, that we would be, everybody's basements would be filled with water if it wasn't for that. I mean, over 14 inches of rain. So I think a lot of it comes down to infrastructure, because there's obviously nothing you can do about tornadoes or certain things, but we are so fortunate here in Sedgwick County. And there are still a lot of areas that have had unbelievable amount of flooding, particularly down in my area between Hayesville and Derby. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Tim?
My heart goes out to all those folks who lost property. There's no amount of insurance claims that can fix, broken family portraits and homes and all that, all those things that just go in with making a house, making a home. As far as helping folks out, it's difficult because it takes dollars to do that. And the last time I checked, counties, cities, and all the local government entities are strapped because of cuts in the past. And so it's very difficult at this time. And it seems like we're just having more of these things. Yeah. And I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I wish my crystal ball and my magic wand and my army and my fairy dust were all working right now, because
don't we
they
all?
don't.
Don't we all? Well, we do know one thing. President Trump signed an emergency declaration for the state of Kansas before the tornadoes even hit, due to all the flooding we've had this year. But FEMA officials tell KSN's Crystal Sherrill that since the state didn't ask for individual assistance, many homeowners will not receive help.
Scary.
The one word that came to this Augusta resident's mind when she realized floodwaters got into her home. Another issue, she doesn't have flood insurance.
Really sick and scary, and my more concern is lose everything.
It's a problem for many in our area. According to recent polls, only about 12% of homeowners even have flood insurance. And officials in all 50 states say they faced flooding or flash floods in the last 5 years.
The reason people don't get flood insurance, it will never happen to me. It's never flooded here before.
Insurance agent David Blanding says although FEMA has no assistance at this time, homeowners will still need a form of denial from their homeowner's insurance to move forward if help opens up.
Unfortunately, with this one, it's after the fact, but you need to plan for the next one.
He says pay attention to what your policy includes and get it from an agent who is flood certified. Homeowners will now be working to clean up what the storms left behind, hoping their families will eventually get some type of help.
I feel like bad and I can do nothing, and it's still wet, and my concern is the molding and the foundation, and we need him and I working on.
And I spoke with one family that their home, they have repetitive flooding, but so they had raised their home up a little bit so it doesn't get wet anymore. But they had been cut off 3 times this last month alone because of floodwaters. Other homes have simply been flooded 3 times this last month. I can't imagine that there won't be some homes that are completely written off because of this.
I remember in 2013 there was a 500-year flood. And my family and we were living in North Newton at the time, and still do. And then last week we had that same type of rain, and it's only been 5 years. So it's this 500-year flood stuff. I wish it would. I wish they'd get their numbers right. But this is another difficult thing, because we want insurance. We want to pay for the damage to our foundations and to our water heaters and our heaters in the basement that get all destroyed. But of course, there's provisions in every homeowner's policy that accept floods out of it. So you got to go pay an arm and a leg for flood insurance, even though you're not in a floodplain. And so, and it only becomes a problem after the fact, And so again, the crystal ball on this is very fuzzy. And we're not used to these floods, and all of a sudden they're happening every 5 years. So again, I think we're in some kind of a change, and we're going to have to deal with it. I hope that we can help our citizens out, and so.
Well, you mentioned flood insurance. I have to wonder, we require people with a mortgage to have home insurance. Is it time to require flood insurance?
That's going to have to be a federally handled issue, and let them decide, because I think that would be very difficult to get passed at the state level.
Interesting.
I'm sure.
Why would that be? I mean, I'm truly curious.
Well,
I don't know.
I think it just comes down to property rights and if people want to have that or not. But really, if the Kansas bankers or anybody that gives mortgages out says, hey, we require this, then there's no way around it.
Okay, so the bankers could do it.
I would assume if you're getting a mortgage, they're the ones that can say how much insurance you have on a vehicle, right? If you have a lien on your vehicle, you have to have, full coverage insurance. So they do have different opportunities for people that owe, if they're owed something.
The problem is you already have a lot of mortgages out there.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of folks that are living in homes that don't have flood insurance, and now we're going to require them to go do that. So, and they weren't banking on that. And when they have school costs and car payments and other kinds of taxes, it's just going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for everybody.
Well, and then there's just being aware that floods are exempt, because I don't think most people, so many times we've done the story, I have house insurance.
Right.
Well, that doesn't cover floods. Most people don't realize that that's a separate rider you've got to get from the federal government.
And they find out the day after the flood from their agent.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, sorry, Tim, we don't cover that.
Yeah. Well, and as we're talking about flooding, of course, Riverfest coming up this weekend in Wichita. Big, huge party here in Wichita. The river so full, the city has closed access to it. So the thing that the city is celebrating is closed.
Yeah, no, it is pretty ironic. And I was talking to Council Member James Clendenin about that yesterday, but just the speed of the currents and just the intensity of the river right now. And you can still look at downtown Wichita, and the river is well above where it normally sits. I mean, I remember when I was on the city council about 7 years ago, the river was so dry you could have walked across it. We were mowing it, if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember.
So it is pretty funny how in just a few years how your opportunities change. And as you remember, we were in a drought back in 2014. So there's just a continual ebb and flow, I think, when it comes to the Riverfest. But we're excited. I heard today it's the 40th largest outdoor event in the world.
All right. Well, and it'll be outdoors, just no river this year.
You
Hopefully it'll go down, and maybe we'll have some river by the next weekend before it ends.
Hopefully.
Cross our fingers. All right. Yeah. Well, Tim, Michael, thank you so much. We are out of time. I appreciate you being here. And thank you as well. We'd like to thank our news partners at KSN News, Cake News, and the Topeka Capital Journal. For now, have a great week.